Today we're going to look at parts of a word with an emphasis on the closed passage, and the closed passage is found in the paper 2, and it's a part of the reading comprehension section that you will have once you go into the BJC. So we're going to focus on parts of a word and connect it to that portion of the BJC paper. I do have a copy of the passage that we're going to be looking at today. I have it available on the stream in our Google Classroom, so you can go ahead and pull it from there once we get to that portion of today's lesson. So the first thing we need to determine before we even begin to look at parts of a word, we need to determine the definition of a word or what a word is. And the dictionary defines a word as a single, distinct, meaningful element of speech or writing. And it may be used with others or sometimes alone to form a sentence and typically shown within a space on either side when written or printed. So in essence, words are things that we use to communicate. And before we even go into detail as to what the various parts of a word are, I really need us to know this particular statement, and that is that words have no meaning unless they are used in a particular context. So why? Why don't words have meaning unless they're used in a particular context? You're trying to understand. Let's look at the word trickle. Trickle is a word that when we look it up, it has 3 possible definitions. One definition is a thin, slow, or intermittent stream or movement, right? And it functions, once you use that definition, it will function as a noun. Another definition is that it is to move or go one by one or little by little. And when we use that definition, it is a verb. And the last one, to issue or fall in drops, and it will also be a verb. So it's very important to note that words have no meaning or no specific meaning unless they're used in a particular context. So based on how trickled is used in a sentence, then we can determine which one of the 3 definitions or dictionary definitions we can apply to the word. So before we get into prefixes, suffixes, root words, there is one key thing I need you to know. And it's something you probably would have studied before, but I just need to mention it briefly today. And that's denotation and connotation. And the denotation of a word is its dictionary definition. So whenever you're able to find the meaning of a particular word within the dictionary, that is the denotation of that word. And not only is it the denotation of that word, it is also said that the word is used literally, or it is the literal meaning of a word. Let's look at the example there. This tea is extremely sweet, and sweet is the word that we're trying now to determine the meaning of. So once we look into the dictionary, we'll see that sweet means has too much sugar. Okay, so let's take now that same word and use it differently. Claudia is such a sweet young lady. In that particular sentence, sweet does not mean has too much sugar. Sweet takes on a completely different meaning, and it could mean well-mannered, friendly, polite, or other positive personality traits. But when that happens, we say that the meaning of the word is in a non-literal sense. And that means then that the word is used figuratively. So whenever the word is used outside of its dictionary meaning, we say that that is the connotation of the word, or the word is used figuratively. And you'll see that come into play in your literature classes when you look at metaphors, similes, personification, alliteration, hyperbole, and all those nice figures of speeches. Okay, so I just wanted to touch that so you know that a word can have a literal meaning as well as a figurative meaning. And for today, we're going to focus mainly on the three main parts of a word. And there are four parts of speech that really come into play when we're studying parts of a word. They are verbs, nouns, adjectives, and adverbs. And later on, we'll understand why they come into play. So here are three main parts of a word. We have the base or root word, prefix, and the suffix. So what is a base word or a root word? A base or root word, it basically gives us the original meaning of a word. In essence, a base or root word is a word part or a part of the word that forms the basis of new words through the addition of prefixes and suffixes. And one thing you'll find is that our root or base words, they have meanings on their own. Let's look at agree. When you agree with someone or you agree with something, that means that you have the same opinion or view of that particular someone or that particular stance. Okay, so let's continue. Root words can stand on their own. Nothing has to be added to them to make them complete. Let's look at some of the root words. Act, form, legal. I'm just pulling three of them. Act, form, legal. Okay, to act means to move or do something. Form means to shape, and legal means related to the law or permitted by law. And this here is just a follow-up assignment for the denotation and connotation that we just looked at. It just basically shows you how words can be used literally and figuratively. We'll only look at the first two. Point the knife downward when you are walking around the room because it is very sharp. And sharp in this particular sentence means that it is extremely pointy. So we can say then that sharp here is used literally because we're able to find the definition of sharp within the dictionary and apply it to this sentence here. So for number one, sharp is used literally. For number two, on the other hand, Chad looked very sharp in his three-piece suit last night. Sharp in this particular context does not mean pointy. Sharp takes on a completely different meaning. One could mean he looked very handsome or well-groomed. So when that happens, we say that the word is used figuratively. So I'm just showing you the different ways our root words can be used within the English language. A prefix now. So we looked at a root or base word and we've determined that our root or base words, they give us the basic definition of a word and they form the basis for new words to be formed. Our prefixes now are groups of letters that are placed at the beginning of a word. And it's very important for you to note that in some cases, when the prefix is added, it may change the meaning of the word. So when we looked at agree as our root word, we said that agree means that you have the same opinion as another person. But when we now add the prefix dis, it changes the meaning of our word entirely. Disagree means that you share a different opinion. So you are no longer of the same belief of what is or was presented. So it's very important to note that sometimes when a prefix is added to a word, the meaning of the word changes entirely. And it's very important that before you even begin practicing the closed passage of the BJC paper, it's very important for you to know the difference and to familiarize yourself with some of the prefixes as well as the suffixes and their functions and meanings. Because what you don't want to do, you don't want to go into the examination and add a suffix or prefix to a word and it's not a word at all. So let's just say I'm a student in the exam and the only prefix I know is UN. So I go into the exam, agree is the word that I pull from the passage. But when I write it now onto the closed passage, instead of putting disagree, I put unagree. That isn't even a word. Okay, so it's very important that you familiarize yourself with prefixes and suffixes. And not only that, with the new words as well that will be formed when you add them. So here is just a list of a few of the prefixes that you will see. I will make available to you, some additional prefixes so you can have them readily available. So what I have here now, remember that you're not writing anything. I'll make the lesson available for you via my Facebook page, Mrs. Myrtle, the educator, and I will also make the resources available to you through the Google Classroom. So this entire PowerPoint, you'll be able to look through it once we're done this afternoon. Okay, so you're not writing. So let's look now at this one. Is my favorite, the I prefix. I-L, I-M, I-N, and I-R. Here are some of the meanings. In, into, not, or against. And when we add them to our root words, they form completely new words. So let's look at legitimate. Legitimate. When we add IL, the word becomes illegitimate. So the meaning of this word will change entirely. The same thing for adequate and inadequate. So these are just a few examples for you to have as a visual as we go throughout the lesson. Suffix. A suffix now, remember we talked about the prefix being a group of letters that we add at the beginning of a base or root word. A suffix now is the completely opposite. A suffix is a group of letters that we will add at the end of a root or base word. And the most important thing for you to note is that sometimes it will change the meaning, but almost every time it will change the part of speech. Remember those four parts of speech that I mentioned earlier: verb, noun, adverb, and adjective. They will be the most common ones that you will see throughout. So it'll be very important for you to familiarize yourself with the meanings of those parts of speech as well as some examples of them. So in this picture, they are having a disagreement. So we started with our root word agree. Then we got a new word when we added the prefix dis, and now we're adding the suffix ment. Let me break it into how it will be so that you're able to see. Okay, so this is our new word that we would have found. formed. Disagreement. Now, there are suffixes that do certain things. There are suffixes that do certain things. So whenever you see certain suffixes at the end of words, you automatically know what part of speech that word is. And this will help you tremendously when you move through your closed passage in determining what you should do with the word. If you should add a prefix, add a suffix, remove the prefix, remove the suffix, or if you should add both. Okay, so let's look at some of the suffixes that we use to form nouns. And a noun is the name of a person, place, thing, or idea. In English language, we normally focus on the two main types of nouns, proper nouns and common nouns. But for this particular exercise, your focus should be on the common nouns because they give us the general name of persons, place, things, or ideas, and they would be the only words that we will actually be able to add suffixes to, okay? So here are a list of suffixes. EE, EER, ERION, ISM, ITY, MENT, NESS, OR, SION, SHIP, and TH. I also have the meaning of those words as well as some examples. So let's take, for example, ER, the suffix ER. The meaning, someone who performs an action. And if we look, help, teach, preach, dance, they are all verbs. And we know that verbs are words that show action or they indicate that something is being done. So help, teach, preach, and dance. So we now have to form new words by adding the suffix ER. And when we add the ER to the end of these words, of course, for dance, we have to drop the E. That is a part of the word in order to add the suffix. But when we add these suffixes on the end, we change our verbs now to nouns. So you will see stuff like that happening when we begin reading the closed passage. You might have a word that you pull from the passage and it's a noun. And when you remove the suffix, it becomes a verb now. So what do you do with that word? Does it make sense in that context? Or do you now have to go and add another suffix or add another prefix to it? Just a few examples. Let's look at movement. Move, retire, abandon, establish, they are all verbs. But when we add the suffix MENT, we turn them into nouns, okay? Now we're going to look at suffixes that we use to turn our words into adjectives. And here is our list: ABLE, FUL, IC, IVE. And adjectives are words that describe nouns. So if a noun is the name of a person, animal, place, or thing, an adjective now is what we use to describe that person, place, thing, or idea. Let's take, for example, ANT. Brilliant, reliant, defiant, and vigilant. Those are our adjectives. Let's also take into consideration IOUS and OUS. Humor is a noun, and when we add the suffix OUS, it becomes an adjective. Grace is also a noun, But when we drop our E and add the suffix IOUS, it becomes an additive. And you will also find, students, that some of the primary rules that you would have learned in primary school, they also come into play with this section. For example, you have to drop the E at the end of a particular word before you add the suffix onto it. So let's look now at our suffixes that we use to form verbs. Our suffixes that we use to form verbs: ed, en, er, ing, izei, se. So laugh is our root word, swim is our root word, drive is our root word, write is our root word, and we're adding the suffix ing. I want you to note that with the swim, although when we write it, it will only have one M. When we go now to put the ing, we have to repeat the consonant. So it's very important that you familiarize yourself with some of the basic rules for rewriting or creating new words as well. Now, these are our adverbs. Our adverbs are suffixes that we use to form adverbs. L-Y-W-A-R-D-W-I-S-E. I want you to pay close attention to the words that have the L-Y on the end. And adverbs are words that we use to describe verbs. Verbs are words that indicate that something is being done, or they indicate action. Our adverbs, they just indicate how that action is being done, whether it's being done slowly, quickly, etc. So it's very important that you familiarize yourself with some of the examples. Now, before we move on, I want us to just go ahead and quickly look at our root words, the prefixes options that we have, as well as the suffixes options. And some of them we will do just for additional practice. So for legal, we're going to add the prefix IL. Legal is our root word. We will add the suffix ly. For humane, we will add the prefix in. Humane is our root word. And then we'll add the suffix ly, inhumanely treated. I want you to notice that as we do this, you will find that some of the words, the parts of speech of the words will change. Let's look at the first one. Place. You can say that it was misplaced. Of course, you'll have to drop the E from the root word in order to add the suffix. So I'll just run a line through that so you can see. That it should be removed. Health. Health is another root word, and health is a noun. But when we add this suffix and prefix, we make it an adjective. That's a few of the examples I am doing, okay? So let's look at taste. Taste. So taste is our root word. Our prefix is this, sorry. Taste is our root word, and full would be our suffix that we would add to the end. So our new word would be distasteful. Okay, just to give you an idea of some of the new words that would be formed as we go through. This is the last one, assigned. It could be reassigned. As well as some other variations, but that's just one. Now we're going to move to the reading comprehension, getting bored in the abacos. That's the closed passage from the 2018 paper that we will focus on today. You can go ahead and access the entire passage from the Google Classroom. For today's session, I will only focus on the first 5. The others you will have to go and do on your own as practice for me once we're done with this session, okay? So what I would have done, I would have pulled the sentences from the original passage, and I would have underlined the word that we're using based on the closed passage and the line that they would have directed us to. And I would have made the change. And I would have also made some notes as to how those changes would have impacted the part of speech of each word. So for number 1, occasional is the word that we're going to use, and the sentence goes, Philip himself has been hunting since he was a boy and still enjoys occasional treks into the bush when he can spare time away from work. And occasional in that particular sentence is an adjective. But when we move now to the closed passage and we pull the word occasional, we cannot use it the way it is because it doesn't make any sense. You cannot say enjoys, but actually it would make sense. Enjoys occasional trekking, but it should be occasionally trekking into the bush when he can spare time away from work. This wasn't a good example of the word not making sense, but in some instances, and we'll see them with the next example, whenever you pull the word from the passage and you go to put it into the closed passage, it does not make sense grammatically. So let's move to the second example where we can better understand that. So number 2, competition, and that word is a noun. The boys at that time were much smaller in size due to the extreme competition for food, and we're directed to line 10. Competition is a noun, right? But when we go now to the closed passage and it says the boys at that time were much smaller in size because they had to. We cannot say competition for food because it does not make sense grammatically. So we have to go ahead now and do some changes or modifications to the word to help our sentence make sense. And the only thing that we could have possibly do was remove the suffix and go back to our root word compete. Let's look now at number 3, frequented, and that is an adjective in this particular sentence. Watching is usually done in the summer months, and as the word implies, involves the hunter sitting in an open area often frequented by wild boars because of its waterhole of flourishing fruit trees. And we're directed to line 14. We're directed to line 14. So let's move now to see what changes we have to make to this word. In order for it to make sense grammatically, we had to remove our first suffix, which was ed, and we went back to our root word, which is frequent. But when we move now to the closed passage, we see that frequent is not adequate enough for us to put on the line. Something is missing from that word. So we now have to determine if we have to add a prefix or a suffix to the end of it. And we would have determined that the suffix ly is the suitable ending for that word. And this is what our new sentence will read. Watching is usually done in the summer months, and as the word implies, involves the hunter sitting in an open area, which wild boars frequently visit because of its waterhole of flourishing fruit trees. Number 4, indication. Indication, and I also want you to note, students, as we're going through, notice how when we make the modifications to these words for the sentences, notice how the parts of speech of the words are changing. So it's very, very important for you to know your suffixes, especially because they are the part of the word that will most definitely impact the part of speech. So number 4, indication. And an indication is a noun. Indication, the word indication is a noun. When in the wild, the dogs on the back of a hunting truck give an indication that the boys are on the loose in the area, and we're directed to line 17. Notice now that when we go to our closed passage, our word that was once a noun now becomes a verb, because we have to go ahead now and, in essence, we have to go ahead and remove the suffix from the end in order for it to make sense grammatically and to fit the context. So when in the wilds, the dogs on the back of a hunting truck indicate that the boys are on the loose in the area.